like just as much as protesting and dissension has evolved, policing and the response to it has evolved.
Oh, absolutely. Well, they got all this equipment, right? They have all of this equipment that is left over from all of these wars that we've never really had, that have been more like just, equipment that is left over from like the Saudi Arabia and all of the Afghanistans and the war and the 9/11 war. Like all of these wars gave us all of this, all of this art, all of this equipment. And so now they're using that equipment on other people, and we have a president that doesn't.
Sanctions it.
Yeah, who just sanctioned more? Who said like today that you should use as much force as you need to sequester these events as he hides in a bunker, right? Like this is not good.
Yeah.
Okay, so I know we just jumped into this conversation. I want to formally introduce the brother I am speaking to. This is Shawn Palmer, Pastor Palmer, as I love to call him, P. Dot. P. Dot. Shawn Palmer serves as the director of Upperman African American Cultural Center at University of North Carolina in Wilmington. He is also the pastor of the oldest African American Presbyterian church in the state of North Carolina, and he considers himself an activist, educator, mentor, theologian, and a creative given his passions and works. I love always chopping it up with you, okay? Because we can go from hood to all good to hit the spirit to hitting the ground. Love it.
Yes, and that's what I love, that I think our energy always is about like liberation, but we also, because we have existed both in like bourgeois settings, but also in very like hood ratchet settings, like we know both, like, and I think like as academia has allowed for us, maybe we're pushing as Gen Xers and millennials and whatever, like we continue to use all that we bring to the table as a way to make sense of our realities. I seek not to put up any part of myself because I don't want a student doing that. So, or a church member.
Right, and I think part of that comes with the fact that we're both Gen Xers, and we are part of the generation where, when our parents had us, they thought that we were going to inherit the fruits of the civil rights. Struggle. And then, you know what I mean? And it was like, ooh, blue, crack it. You know what I'm saying? And all these things happened, and we didn't get it.
Oops. 9/11.
9/11. And you know what I'm saying? And then the recession.
More debt than they hit.
Exactly. You had the war on drugs, thugs, all that stuff like that, So then we had to become creative in how we maneuver through these spaces, because a lot of us, our parents, we are either first generation going to college, or our parents probably went to college and still were trying to figure it out. In the case of my father was kicked out of Southern University for protesting. And at that time in the 70s, he was completely blacklisted, So we had to be extremely innovative in us maneuvering. I would say this for me. In order for me to have made it, I had to find my kinfolk. And my kinfolk had to be people who celebrated the coded, the double speak, living between, different things. And as you so aptly put it, holding what mainstream did not understand as sacred space. And so I appreciate that about you.
The same. The admiration is the same, because when we talk, you will go from the classroom to a southern porch so quick, to a kitchen. And like our conversations just go, and so like I do think there is utility, particularly in this moment, where Black people are going to be asked to perform a lot of different kinds of things, right? So you're going to get performances of Black folk who are going to say, which is what you see in your celebrity class already, like, don't burn it down, cooler heads prevail, as though they forgot that they made it out the mud, right? So like, and then like they also face prison industrial complex every week, right? Like some of these, some of the, rappers are exactly where they say they come from, right? So, and so like you have that, you have kind of a disjointed Black public intellectual who is a critical race theoretician, but is not a critical race activist. Can't organize a phone call unless they're being lauded and celebrated. We'll have graduate students that they won't pay. We'll have folk that they will not take care of on those campuses, knowing that COVID is hit, knowing that students don't have medical insurance, and then we'll send them out a book list telling them what to read about Just Mercy or some of these other amazing books that's out there, but the books ain't gonna save us. So like, the books can train us, the books can help us learn, but the books are not gonna save us alone. And so like, you got that performance. Then you have a political class performance happening where really, honestly, we really can't, many of the politicians, hold on, Zach. Hold on, my kid just entered the room.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay, I'll make sure of it. Let me get up. Let me finish my talk.
Hey, it is real. It's real.
Yeah, I'll come get you. And he wants another train because that's what Zach likes is trains. But getting back to like this political performance piece, like you have a political class performing, trying to say white stuff, and then you have education. Like you see all of these institutions, regardless of whether they're led by white hands or Black hands, articulating the same message. Let's be calm. Let's have a peaceful protest. Let's be peaceful. And like you can ask for peace, but how do you want people to make sense of being unemployed, and probably in Black communities at somewhere near 40%, since it's usually double what it is for everybody, right? So like, that's one problem. What does it mean to be an essential worker, to be paid $7.25, $11, $5, $11 in New York City don't get you that far, right? $7 down south ain't gonna get you that far. So you are putting your life on the line as people walk into rooms and spaces and they don't give a crap about what you got going on. So they're not wearing no mask. Ain't no mask to be found in some of these places. And so like, you are the next victim of COVID, period. You have watched your pastors die. You've watched your grandmama die. You've watched your aunts die. You've watched uncles die. So your whole family reunion has just gone up in smoke, right?
In addition to that, you're not even given the opportunity to properly grieve because there will be
no. Ain't no funeral. The church can't help you. Ain't nobody bringing no pies and no cakes and no chicken. They're not doing the normal rituals that Black folk usually embody, because our theology is an embodied theology. We are people who stand with you. Our theology is a theology of hands raising and singing from the pit of your belly. Like, our theology, our way of holding space for you is to sit with you and comfort you, right? It's to hold you in our arms. And in a moment where none of those needs are being met, right? We were nice when we found out about Ahmaud Arbery. So people tried the nice piece. Like, they put on their little black t-shirts and they ran around the country for 2.3 miles, I think. That's what they was doing, right? Like, and they called it protest. They were calling that protest. Let's be clear. Like, Black folk were calling that protest because they was like, I stand with Ahmaud, 2.3 miles, we gonna run around. And like, we watched this Black man get shot on tape, and it's been since February. Like, Black History Month has gone, Women's History Month has gone and passed, and ain't nobody arrested none of these white people down there in Georgia, okay? The coronavirus outbreaks are happening in places where there are Black churches, and so we're dealing with that. And there's no clear messaging on any of this stuff. And then we come back and a sister is shot with in her house with a no-knock warrant. So like, you got, like, the sister's name is Breonna Taylor. Folk down in Louisville going ham because these cops going into people's houses, not knocking. And this sister ain't even the person that they want, ain't even the person that they need. She lost her life because you trying to be cute with a gun, okay? They not prosecuted. Let's be clear. Ain't none of them been prosecuted because it's still Clantucky, okay? Now we here in Minneapolis. We in St. Paul, Minneapolis, which I'll tell you as a former resident, lived there for 4 years, worked in the Urban League for a year and a half, did freedom schools there. I lived in Minneapolis. Like I went to the Chisholm, I got the chicken spots, made the black book for the black kids so they would know where the stuff was. Lived in Minneapolis, had some of my best life, went to Prince's Club, had fun. I did Minneapolis and St. Paul, okay? So here's the thing, that black community is straight up the Mississippi, from Mississippi. These black folk know terrorism.
And
these black folk live.
And that's what I wanted to bring that up, because me having family from the South, being raised in California, but living for 12 years in the North, in Jersey, and working in New York, there's this sentiment or understanding that anything, below the Bible Belt is the Deep South, and that's where the boogeyman lives. But in a lot of these cities, you know what I'm saying? And a lot of these cities, in these northern cities, it is, even where my father's family migrated to, most of them went to Chicago and, I forgot the city outside of Chicago. But I went there and I had just been to Mississippi. There was literally no difference.
No.
Even down to the how spatially it looked and the buildings it looked. So that really just destroys and disrupts this myth of being in the North means you're somehow freer.
Right, and here's what we know about the North. The North has sundown towns. The North lynched. Let's be clear. And many of these shootings around the country that are on television and on our social media are not happening necessarily in the South. Now, I ain't saying that the South is not complicit. Don't get me, hear me well. It is just a different mode of operating. And because, again, even when I ran to Minnesota to leave South Carolina to go to college, I thought I was going to be safer in Minnesota than I was in South Carolina. But I can tell you, I got called nigger more time in Minnesota than I did in South Carolina. And I think because there is a tenuous relationship with white folk who know in South Carolina that things can be turned upside down in a matter of seconds playing around with black folk. Also, black people still live down south. It's still tons more of us concentrated down south. We still 30% of states, 20% of states, right? In the Midwest, that's not the case, right? So in Minnesota, Minneapolis, I think black population is somewhere between 12 to 15%. I think it's not a lot. But again, these people are straight from Mississippi and up from Chicago, which is why I'll tell people, I am not surprised that these black folk who are in Minneapolis and St. Paul are not playing with y'all, with us, because these black folk minds been right up there for a very long time. Here's what I mean by that. In the 90s, I remember churches pulling out their images of white Jesus and taking them and getting a local black funeral home to donate a casket. They took the casket, threw all of the images from their churches into a casket and buried that mug. And the pastors did that.
Now that's what we call some radical theologian type shit. For real. Straight up, that's gay. That's some David Walker's appeal type shit.
Yeah, it is really it's a lived theology of black radicalism, our black liberation theology. They was we not gonna keep these images up in our church when we know that they're unhealthy for black people who already see whiteness as saving them in a space where whiteness is not saving them, right? So that's one, I'm giving you one piece. The other thing that is true about black Minnesotans is they don't actually send their kids to any of those schools around the Twin Cities. Not nary one. They're not going to Minneapolis. They're not going to University of Minnesota. They're not going to Mankato State. They're not going to McAllister. They're not going to any of those schools. You rarely see a black family send their child to a predominantly white institution in the city. in the main, their children go to historically Black colleges. They push it. They're like, you gonna leave here and see Black people. Like I can remember that. I can remember standing ovations for kids who were headed to Clark Atlanta and Morris Brown and Payne and all over. So like if you go to HBCUs, sometimes you will see like cadres of Black kids from Minneapolis and St. Paul, right? And that's a very radical perspective when you sitting next to I think there somewhere in the neighborhood of 12 to 15 colleges within a 30-mile radius, including the major university of the state, which is University of Minnesota, right? So you have University of Minnesota, and then you have all of these major liberal arts colleges from Augsburg to what's the school? I can't think of the school that's down the street from us. But there's another school, there's a Catholic school that's right behind McAllister, Hamlin. Like, so you got lots of Gustavus Adolphus, like as I'm starting to remember, you have lots of schools. Now what happens is Black folk from the South, again, following migration patterns, there were Black folks from the South, Black folks from the East, and Black folks from the West who were brought into those schools. And they went to school in the Twin Cities for the most part. I don't think those migration patterns have changed over the last 15, 20 years. Like they just have not. So again, like this is a community that already had like strong radical leanings. And like Black folk there, I mean, it's a liberal city in general, it's already a liberal city. So Black folk there are tied to a much more liberal, rigorous thought pattern that is permeating from the colleges, but is also a part of their lived environment. Now, I will tell you this, even all of that said, I mean, I saw churches where I was just up there like 2 years ago, 2 or 3 years ago. And I saw a church that had a sign on its, like a white church, had a sign. It was like less than 3 miles away from my school. And my school is supposedly known for internationalism, multiculturalism, and like community service. That's what they say they're known for.
But what's the school that you went to?
McAllister College, McAllister. So they just switched over presidents. They got a new, I think it's for the president, new president's a sister, and I think she's Latinx, I think. And so like they always pride themselves on this very multi-ethnic melting pot. That sits in strong proximity to their very, the levels of white structural racism and anti-Blackness that is very present in Minnesota, right? Like it is very present. You can be in spaces where people check your IDs more than once or where you will be stopped. It was not uncommon for Black kids to be pulled out of the bathrooms at their school, at the universities in the city, and to be beaten by white people. It was not uncommon for that stuff to be hidden. It was not uncommon for teachers to try to mess up your grades, your travel abroad, all of those kinds of things. If you decided that you were gonna come for them in class, it was not uncommon to be called a nigger or to have somebody write the N-word across your stuff, and for schools to actually like take the side of the student. Like it was not uncommon because the whiteness was performing a certain multiculturalism that it really did not embody. It was not when we get to I saw white people do really malicious stuff there. Like I watched a kid get it put in, when I was in school, watched a kid get put in an insane asylum because he had a very evangelical belief of Christ, but he was hanging around a set of students who then turned him in and said that he needed to be in a mental institution. And so, I mean, it was Black Student Union, it was the Urban League, it was the NAACP that was rallying around this student to get him out so he could finish out his senior year. So he'd go to med school. He's a doctor currently. But like, that was the kind of ridiculous, kind of pervasive, pernicious whiteness that is true about Minnesota. That Minnesota nice is just nice. It's not, but that stuff is, it's volatile. It shows up when you least expect it, and it is strategic. It is strategic. It will kill you. So it was not like, as much as I was surprised, I really wasn't surprised because Minnesota is a very white space in general. So they might be coming to, they might live in Minneapolis. They might live in a very multi-ethnic, multicultural, multiracial space, but that's not who the state is. The state is white with a strong indigenous population and pushed out.
So do you still have people who are in Minnesota, and what are they saying right now? What is the conditions? What's the environment?
I do have I have former professors there who I consider mentors to me. Shout out to Duchess Harris. And then I have former classmates who are there. All of them are holding on. Like they honestly are. They it's not good. The energy is not good up there. They are. The other thing about Minneapolis, St. Paul that people may not realize is that Minneapolis is a space that has a lot of interracial marriages and relationships. So I know a lot of Black men there have married white women. So there are a lot of biracial kids running around the cities, right? And it was like I would say in the 90s, it was ahead of its time for the rest of the country. But like biraciality is not a new thing in the city. But like imagine living in a city where Black women are the activist class and they're doing the activist work because that's what they're doing. But the relationships around the city between Black men and white women is very much like there's a lot of interracial love, a lot of interracial dating, particularly like George Floyd's situation isn't as abnormal as people think. So I have a lot of classmates in those categories that were raised in homes where one parent was Black and one parent was white, and and so again, like they are making sense of this. But it is a place where you will see racialized identities, and I mean they're scared, but they're also activists, and so and I see that with my Latino classmates and my Asian classmates who are also doing this work, like to really, thinking through the legacy of racism and how they're going to interrupt it. And what's clear in Minneapolis is they know what they're doing. They're not playing with you. So I'm appreciative.
And added to that, a lot of police officers are former military. So they have experience in destroying Black people and brown people.
Right, and they are Black people and brown people. That's what's the worst part about this, right? These are not just, we sometimes think of them as being just white people doing this work, but there are Black and brown hands who are tied to the system because they're tied to protecting the United States, and really the petty bourgeoisie, like a very elite petty bourgeoisie, which is why you hear this language of like, well, we got to protect buildings. Buildings in Black communities have never been protected.
Yes.
Whether you're talking gentrification, gentrification, the crack epidemic. I mean, all of these shanties that were left, like all of these Black, beautiful middle class homes that were left and turned into crack hideaways, and there has never been a time in American history where we haven't bulldozed Black communities down to the ground and taken a highway and thrown it over it, or blown it up, or set it on fire. And we have, there from Birmingham to Montgomery, like we don't mind, like there's never been a prioritization of Black people's monuments, or Black people's memory, or Black people's ability to flourish. Ain't never. America has never prioritized that. But we do prioritize corporate business. We do prioritize a liquor store. We will prioritize a Target that won't sell to people the things that they need so that they can combat tear gas, because they hadn't expected to go outside when they was marching and saying, hands up, don't shoot, or I can't breathe, that somebody would be so nefarious that as to put an agent in the air that actually might help spread COVID. Nobody, so that's the thing. It's, you living with folk who see Black folk in these communities as enemy combatants. And and so now we're back to thinking about ourselves really honestly as contraband in the US.
That's deep. Well, I know you've been laying out kind of this socio-political and racial mapping of Minnesota in general, Minneapolis specifically. What makes George Floyd different?
So I think what makes George Floyd different is that it's in a pandemic, right? It's in a pandemic where people cannot get together, socially distance. It's also in a pandemic, like all plagues, they make you realize the depth of gross inequity. Even if we think biblically, like a plague will make you realize who is the least of these, right? So Black people have had about 2 months to really be cognizant that they are the least of these, right? On top of prison industrial complex, on top of all of the other things. Again, like I go back to, they tried to do it nicely and tried to run around the street for 2.3 miles. And then, they saw that video. And then I think in Minneapolis, it's the wrong space because it's South Minneapolis where Black folk live. It's in a space of gentrification, right? So this space is being gentrified. This place has been like the home for Black people for almost since they settled in Minneapolis. St. Paul has another space called Frogtown, which is where Black folk used to live, right? I don't know where they live now, but that's where they used to live, right? So you got that going on. I think that watching somebody literally put their knee on a person's neck for 8 minutes felt like Michael Brown, felt like we've seen this before, felt like this ain't gonna be okay. And I think that on some level, like the visual is so powerful that when you get people like, well, we need to backpedal. We need to think through like how we decide who's gonna be, like, we need to figure out like what the charges need to be, because we don't want them to be arrested and then we be wrong. Like all of that level of backpedaling is so difficult, particularly when they released a medical report that basically said the man killed himself. And I would say those were like major tipping points. But also when the police decided they were gonna tear gas folk, right? Like, this is not one of those moments where you should be tear gassing folk. And I think the complicitness was to go from being tear gassed, then to not be able to have access to resources, teaming up against each other to say, okay, they tear gassed you outside. This target really actually supports the police force and they think Blue Lives Matter. And so therefore, when you come into this store, even if you're gonna pay for some stuff, we don't really want your money because that's what you get. That feels like 1965. That feels like 1967. And what you hear Black people saying nationally is, I can't breathe. Like, we cannot breathe collectively. You will not let us breathe. You're gonna hunt us down and you're gonna kill us indiscriminately. And like, then you're gonna lie on us as an institution and say we killed ourselves. Then we're gonna go out and march. We're gonna go out and try to do this little peaceful march thing. But what we have to do is contend with your level of violence exacted on our bodies. And y'all don't want us to defend ourselves. Y'all don't want us to have health care. And then you don't actually want us to have access to the things that we can purchase, like in a pandemic. And I think everybody's like, nah, doc, that's just not gonna work. Like, that ain't gonna work. I think Black people have collectively had enough. I think we go to jobs every day that microaggress us. And for sure, that is one of the things that young transplants to Minnesota say all the time. There was a video released by 2 boys who own like an entrepreneurial company up in Minnesota. They had just recently graduated from University of Minnesota. They were in their gym, in their building, and a white man walked into the building and started filming them and saying, you need to leave or else I'm calling the cops. So again, we saw Amy Cooper in a white male version happening the following day that Amy Cooper's thing shows up. Like, there's no break. And so like what Black people are exhausted. We are an exhausted people in the US. And so
and then on the other spectrum of that, you have white people who clearly know that they can use their whiteness and weaponize.
Weaponize
it. And when people say they're exhausted, and people say this is, not only is Minnesota exist in these 1960 conditions, but America does. Because if a woman in New York can call and say that a Black man is harassing her and her dog, it's just Emmett Till and the whistle. It is similar.
And so again, like, they watched that on Monday and Tuesday. That was Monday and Tuesday in Black America. So like cognitively, what was the expectation? So like 2 different cities got 2 different incidents. Both incidents are death dealing. Both incidents could kill these folk. And we also got Breonna Taylor's folk down in Louisville. Like, it's so much. This is like eating racist cake. Like, it's too much. It'll kill you. So
you're right.
So racism is too decadent in this period. And we've known that. It's it's not that we black folk know this, right? We watched a little peaceful Black man who's biracial with the hair, he's a Kappa, get on the football field and just kneel and try to tell people like, this ain't okay. We done seen 13th, we done seen all the different movies. We done watched, When They See Us, like in the last year, we're dealing with Trump's America. We done watch people we call sons of bitches. We done listen to folk we call very fine people when they run over people with their cars. Like, it's just too much. And it's too much in not just one part. One of the reasons I think you get a place where 19 plus cities are on fire is because what Black America is coming to the conclusion of is there's no place you can run. And here's the thing: it really isn't it isn't bourgeois Black America. Let's be clear: it's not bourgeois Black America. The Black America that we see coming together is, when I say this, like, bourgeois Black America might be articulating the rage, right? But these are our grandbabies, and these are our children who are on these lines as normal. It ain't nothing changed. The difference is this isn't built in respectability politics. I'll tell you just a quick note. My brother is a Crip, right? Like, he's a Crip. And so
so I'm sorry, I had to do that. I'm from LA,
Yeah, I get it. And you got all blue. So yeah. And my brother was out there. My brother has been to jail a couple of times. But my brother, this moment feels like he's tapped into his activist moment. And so like in this moment, like, because he is risking his life and limb as a diabetic, as a young Black man in America who feels like he didn't get a good education, which we know is true, whose mama died because of conditions that were related to like a horrible medical condition, who has lived in abject poverty, which is where he met the gang in the first place, right? Whose additional family, whose gang family feels like family, right? Feels like family, and is family to him. So for me, like, if my brother's out there on the line, right, then I know that other brothers and other sisters of similar ilk and background are on the line, right? And even as you have an activist class coming out of middle school, colleges and high schools and whatnot, who are in college or have that first job and they trying to hide their identities, right? But like, it's real. Like, this is real. So like, you got gangbangers coming together to go outside and like protest. Yeah.
Right. And I think this is, I would say within the last 3 days, on my social media, I have a lot of people who would be like my colleagues or within that whole vein. So there's academics, there's what we consider professional class, middle class, blah, 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 blah. And I just hear, oh my gosh, they're burning and looting.
Right.
Oh my gosh, they're destroying all of the property. I'm sorry.
They don't even own none of that property. Even Black rich folk don't own none of that. We don't own none of that. We have negative wealth. We have negative.
Right.
Y'all.
And we don't even know what the face of a real protester looks like. Of course, there are definitely provocateurs and agitators.
Absolutely.
And paid informants and everything that are totally inserting themselves and disrupting or attempting to disrupt.
Right.
People like your brother. Yes, but people like your brother have been invisible his whole life.
Whole life.
And let me
whole life.
And let me tell you, I'm gonna tell you this. When the 92 LA uprising hit, I was 16. I was ready to turn that city out and tear that motherfucker up. And my father snatched me by the collar and said, "You're gonna take your ass back into the house," right? And it wasn't that he disagreed with the fact of protest and demonstration and even the uprising. His point was, you do all of this work and nobody appreciates it. They'll eat off of your struggle, but will not bring you up. And so I think that somebody like your brother is a result of all these people who sit in these classes, you know what I mean, or the petty bourgeois class that we talked about earlier, that you mentioned earlier.
Right.
And will not even, I'm talking about Black people at this point, and will not even see your brother.
Right. Oh, my brother's invisible, right? My brother is invisible until I make him visible in my classes, right? I make my brother visible. I carry my brother, which is why I was like, well, Palmer, the thing that you got to do is, like, if he calls you, you got to have some bail money. Like, you got to have, see, Black folk we have not imagined that Black folk are also, and this is where I've had to tell colleagues, like, and like, folk, back off, because some of these levers that y'all talking about sound, you say they, so y'all try to fall into the Martin Luther King vein after avoiding all of the African American studies classes in your pedigree, in your training. Like, you never took one Black class to learn about medical apartheid or to learn about economic development. And you're a businessman or a doctor, I'm gonna charge y'all up, right? Like, y'all wanna be experts in a moment where your training has not given you any expertise, right? Like, because y'all decided, and I'm pointing the finger, yes, I'm pointing the finger, right? Because y'all decided that Blackness was ancillary to the actual really good training that you were getting. So that's why you can't make sense of race work right now, right? So let the folk who do this work teach you so that you can be informed, right? So that's the problem.
And let me add this, and this is, I mean, as a Black person, you live out in a lot of ways what you study in your coursework in terms of critical race theory.
Right.
There are some things about critical race theory and theory that if you are an academician, you either don't understand, have not lived out, or have not been there in a very long time. And you are disconnected. Right. And so when in this discussion about, burning, looting, right? You as a theologian, I love hearing your mind, but you as a theologian, and let me say this for those of you who are listening, I am the potty mouth in this conversation. I will come cussing up and down, but you know what, Pastor forgives me. Thank you, Pastor.
Pastor might join you, so just be careful. I think it's hard in this moment to imagine. So here's real talk. The level of respectability politics that is embodied in this moment is not gonna do. And we've been telling you that. Professionals have been telling you that. And here's the charge of the intellectuals. The challenge is that we've been training white folk to do this work because we not in the spaces where Black people are.
Dang, that's an indictment, sir. That is a straight up indictment.
We're not intentionally in the spaces. The best of us are not at historically Black colleges. I'm not being funny, and I'm not saying anything about the professors who commit to that. But when you commit to that, like, those professors are choosing to take their careers to the underground. That is what they're choosing to do. And all of these folk who are writing about Black stuff have not spent 10 years in Black spaces. They don't. They don't. And I'm sorry, like, that means something different. You training white folk. You are. And we're complicit.
And I'm going to tell you, I was on this diversity, equity, and inclusion call. And, you know what? I gotta go back to my Southern roots. Something in my gut told me not to do it, But I said, let me just.
That was the Holy Ghost. That was the Holy Spirit right there. The Holy Spirit. She was telling you to. She was like,
Don't
Don't do it. Never. Always trust your Holy Ghost.
You know what? And let me tell you, I've been listening to her a lot more these days. Holy Ghost told me, you go get your cigar and your red wine, and you go sit up on that deck.
Go sit down.
And you meditate and you pray. But I went ahead, because you like, let me kind of show up. You know what I'm saying? In this diversity, equity, and inclusion summit.
What they saying.
And the Black woman told me that it was kind of like what she felt proud, one of the things she most felt proud about in quarantine was that she was able to continue to pay for her housekeeper's salary. After that, I emailed the people, take me off the list, don't ever respond to me ever again. I said, have we as Black academicians have gotten so far from who we are, the uprising and the rebellions that are taking place?
The answer is yes. I think to root our, I love the author, the activist, the intellectual practitioner, Joy James, who says that in one of her more phenomenal, like one of her earlier works, this might be in the late 80s, early 90s, that if Black people do not root we are not, I don't know if we are our ancestors' wildest dreams. I don't know that. I really started to question it more and more. And I can't even tell you I raised the point. Black Twitter be raising these points, right? So when we look up, if our activism, if our raison d'etre is not to free and liberate our people, when we know that they are in struggle and in chains in so many ways, zip ties are chains, right? Like these barriers to get to college are chains. The high school, the prison industrial complex is a chain, right? And who is rendered invisible is not just Black boys, it's Black queer kids, it's Black girls who are living in environments right now where they're being sexually assaulted, right? Who cannot go out the door, right? And school is freedom. So like, I struggle with Black folk who do work, but who do not connect, who are only connected to Black struggle to write the book.
Yeah.
That ain't Du Bois. That ain't Carter G. Right. That's not these other people who have come before us. We are intellectuals for the sake of being intellectuals. We are not intellectuals for the sake of freeing people. Some of us do freeing work because that's what we want to do. But for the most part, if you look in your classroom and if you are not actively training Black students and you are wondering where the Black students are and you don't go get them, or you're not interested in getting them on, if you are an educator, then you are taking advantage of the things that people have fought for. You are, period. There's no discussion with that. So I do think, like, when I see petty, and again, my timeline is very similar. I got Jack and Jill folk and alphas and Greeks and all of that. And so some of them are like, well, I don't know what I can do. Well, at bare minimum, you can take your money and put it in a bail fund. At bare minimum, you can start some food projects. At bare minimum, you don't have to go to Gucci. You could go to the Black vendor and buy your stuff. And there are very high-end fashion offices and tailors that do really nice stuff if you got to stay in the nicer stuff. Right, but what we want to do is we want to throw the rock and hide our hand, to use the language of of the country. We want to be able to interrogate whiteness with a teacup in our hands. And I'm not saying there isn't a place where that could be done, but today ain't it. And so if you have not come to liberate, if you are not coming to liberate the people, you're going to be interrogated, which is what's happening, right? Like Black preachers are getting on, some of us, well, I don't want to talk about that because I don't really want to talk about that. Okay. What does the Holy Spirit tell you to talk about then? Well, I want to talk about not fighting people and hiding your cheek, letting somebody smack you on one side of the face and all that kind of stuff. And like that, time out for that kind of slave theology. Like, it's time out for that. So people still want $50 lines and $100 lines and $150. Like, time out for these lines and the strip club mentality in the church, right? It's time out for that. Taking money and throwing it at the altar like you making it rain at the, that's strip club. That's not the church. Like, the church is not that place. Jesus is so radical that Jesus turns the systems upside down. So, like, you on the wrong side of this. Like, you just on the wrong side of this. So, like, that's the church. We ain't even got the politicians, economists, political figures, teachers, educators who think the black kids that look just like them are not smart enough to go to college, right? Like, we ain't even there. And you got young folk you got elders, you have these people who are in all of these areas, not a lot of them, but you got enough of them going, that ain't gonna work. And you know what we do with those people? We get mad with them. We don't want them in the meeting. We don't want them to have a job. And that is the cost of doing liberation work. The cost of liberation work is that it does show up in our jobs. It will show up. It will show up to dismantle your future. The good thing is, ain't nobody in charge of this future if we following David Walker, but the one who gave us breath.
Interesting. Okay, so my question is, I know you've been in a lot of conversation with people over the days of the uprisings, and historically there hasn't been as many rebellions across the United States since the assassination of MLK and in the 60s, right? Where they called it the Bloody Summers or the Red Hot Summers. The red hot summers, if I'm for sure.
I think you're right, but I think they, in books it says red summers, but you're right.
Red summers, excuse me. So, as a theologian, when you put on this theologian lens, because a lot of people are invoking King. If King were alive, King wouldn't do this. Oh my God. Yeah. Well, I was going to ask what your response is to this.
I was like, y'all shot him dead. Y'all shot him dead in a nice suit. He was attempting to have some coffee on his porch, and y'all shot him dead in Memphis. And then you memorialized him and turned him into a McDonald's commercial. And then you left his widow to suffer with a bunch of kids. I mean, it was Black people who really believed in her that had to go. I think it was Oprah at one point. It was but there were other. It was Harry Belafonte at another point. But like, there were these other Black people making sure that these kids got off to school and making sure that they ate every day, because the revolution did not stop, but also that home had to live. So like, we are memorializing a king. We are deifying a king without taking seriously King's real work. We're doing King like we do Bible. Meaning that we eisegete King. We take King out of the context. I don't even, if you start with King, I want to throw something at you, because I know you haven't read King, right? Like, to read Where Do We Go From Here, Chaos Our Community, or to read like any of his works, and some of the stuff that is unpublished, right? But like that is now being published, or has been published in the last 15 years, right? Y'all ain't reading. And so ain't no need for us to don't invoke him and be like he had a dream, because his dream is not, y'all don't even want that dream. Y'all don't want the basic dream. Y'all don't want to, what y'all want Black people to do is to be okay with being abused and being the enemy of the state as contraband, as a former form of property at any given point to deal with your anger, to deal with white anger and white madness, to mete out like death and violence upon Black bodies, as to continue to say white people still matter more. And King was never gonna be okay with that. And like, I get mad, and this I tell my class this, when I'm teaching my class, I said like, well, they'll be like, oh, well, the nonviolence movement. I said, well, what made it nonviolent? Because I can show you images and they look very violent, right? We are just okay with Black bodies being the bearers of violence. The same way the state was okay with taking Jesus and nailing him to a cross, right? Like, we are okay with some bodies having exacted pain on their bodies for the rest of us, right? And Black bodies are not, and in this moment, Black kids are telling y'all, we are not okay being the bodies of violence. And they are listening, right? They heard us say, do not blow up your own communities. They was cool. They was like, cool, we're just gonna go down to Beverly Hills. We about to fuck Sephora up. We gonna go to the Gucci store and we gonna snatch all this shit up out of there. It wasn't like, you know, like people were like, well, what did Gucci do to you? Gucci participates in black stereotypes of slavery.
Yo, I had to remind some people of that, and I was like, yo, I think I remember you coming back to school bragging how you stole a VCR, a TV during the riots. But the difference between then and now is when the Black people and the Latino people attempted in LA to move to the Fairfax district and the Beverly
it was like,
whoop, the AK-40, the police, the AK-47s, the business owners sitting on their rooftops and said, "Oh, not today, no, oh no." And these people right now, I said, we're about to take this bus, you know what I mean, and give it to them in these areas.
And like, let's go back to Minneapolis. The looting, it's hilarious to watch. But much of the looting and rioting and burning down of businesses was intentional. Like, they intentionally took the target down because the target did not validate their humanity. They intentionally burned to have the building that people were on television talking about. It was meant for, it was an apartment complex in an area that needed more apartment complexes. Well, it was a gentrifying space, actually, because the rents were supposed to be in the neighborhood of $1,200 to $1,500 for a one bedroom. I'm sorry. Unless you live in New York, $1,200 to $1,500 is out of control for a one bedroom. I'm sorry. And Minneapolis is snow. Ain't no coastline. I'm sorry. Ain't nobody gonna do that, right? They burned down the liquor store. Well, but we know that alcohol is one of the major killers of Black folk, and the Black folk don't own the liquor store. So again, like, and what is so fascinating about people who get it in this moment is that there were store owners who said, justice needs to be served. My building can burn. Like, there were restaurateurs who own stuff, like folk love the restaurant, but it burned. And it might not have been an intentional burn, but it had to, it burned as a part of the other experiences of things being burned. But like, even they get it.
Right, and this is like, what about this? Do you not understand that there will be unintended consequences? That is just a matter of fact. When you have all of these people, and of course there are people that are coming, of course there are people that, don't have your interest or the same interest in terms of what it is.
Right.
But that is what happens when you have these ad hoc improvisational moments of rage. It happens. And we can't dictate to people how they express it.
Well, there is no handbook to protest. What people want are beautiful commemorative marches that remind them of a day that does not exist any longer. The problem is, it does exist. And march, like a beautiful march along a street is gorgeous, but it don't, peaceful, like, until you put something in play that makes people uncomfortable, we can let you march all day long. That's the beauty of this system. The system has learned that it will let you, you can come get a permit, we'll set up the little barricades, and you can go straight down, and we're not gonna be bothered by that. We know that you're bothered by economy. That's what the kids are saying. We know that you're bothered by economy. So if we just burn down your stuff and go back to our little cute Black neighborhoods, which you are gentrifying, because some of it's and some of it's just gentrifying. So, but and we'll go back to our neighborhoods with our churches and our stuff. Like, we still got like a chicken shack around there somewhere. So we'll go back over there, but we're gonna burn down the Prada building. We burning down Prada, because didn't Prada just, didn't Prada do something crazy a couple months ago?
They had like the blackface, blackface, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Sephora as an example, here's the thing, like, people don't realize that their actions have meaning. When you laid off, when Sephora laid off all of its employees because they were going, they were deciding to go against the grain, or they were going to lay off all of their employees because of COVID-19. It was, as I understand it, was a phone call. They laid them all off, and then they told them, if you want to reapply to this job, you will have to reapply. Like, you want to come back to this job, you'll have to reapply. Now that's so cold-hearted. Like that's if that's how you doing employees, then there's nothing humanitarian about that, right? Like there's nothing humanitarian about treating people like that. And I think that's also what you hear. The other thing is the reason they're not shooting all these people, because I do think if it was just Black people marching, Black people would be dead. But because these are multi-ethnic and multi-class movements, because you do have Antifa, which means anti-fascist, right? Out there. You do have provocateurs out there. You do have white provocateurs out there. And they can't tell, they don't know one from the other, right? So, I mean, de Blasio's daughter was out there in New York and she got arrested, right? So there is a way in which we know that if we put white folk on the front line, that none of them gonna be harmed like the Black people who are in it. Like that's just I ain't trying to tell the secrets.
But that is a tactic. One of my colleagues in New York is she's heavy demonstrator for Black Lives Matter. And she's a white woman, and she was like, look, one of the if you are a white woman, she said, if you are a white woman, you know what you could do? You could stand and do a formation between the police and the Black and brown protesters, if that's all you do, because when they see a white female body, the process is different. You know what I'm saying? So, and there are, and I do have to agree with you. There are some things in looking at this, and just kind of asking, my father in terms of like protesting. And he said, one of the things that we used to say in the 60s and 70s is, you can't kill me because I'm already dead. I have nothing to lose. And that's what these young folk are saying. If they got into school, they're probably up to their eyeballs in debt. They don't have a proper job. They are, still living at their parents' house. They don't see a future for themselves. So if you don't see a future and then in this administration and all that's going on, it's like, well, I don't have anything to lose.
Right. There is no hope. There is and we gonna die because there's an illness or there's a virus. Like it's so like I'd be honest with you, I am mind blown to live in this environment. Just to imagine that this is where we are. But I mean, like pointing back to King, I do think that people need to lay off the King references. I think that people need to find another activist to situate their concerns with. I think that the family is tired of watching their father, watching their uncle and grandfather be used like a chew toy for white supremacist value systems. Like, I mean, and I think every Black person collectively rolls their eyes when you hear King be used. And I actually think this, like when we're looking at mayors like Keisha Bottoms, are we looking at folk who are invoking King as Black folk in places like Atlanta where they think that's Wakanda, which I think that's hilarious because Wakanda is not Atlanta, given its legacy of police brutality. Right.
Its legacy of police brutality, the gentrification that's going on, huge wealth gaps that are in there.
Huge wealth gaps.
And then the mass incarceration, all the people getting arrested. Oh my God.
Yeah, like Atlanta looks pretty until you see who they grinding up. That shit is the Wiz. That's what that is. That mug is Emerald City with an underbelly that is based on that sweatshop where the evil witch lived. That's what that is. And I'm telling the truth. Like Black people are ground up in Atlanta. You can be Atlanta has one of the worst like drug and sex trafficking problems in the nation. So and that's Black and brown bodies being used up like that. So don't miss me with Wakanda, because if that's Wakanda, I don't want to go. I don't want to go no more. I want. So again, like when you hear
the East Side,
performance
take Compton shit.
Yeah. So I'll be back in Lexington. I can just handle Lexington, but on the Sandhills is what we call it. I do think that thinking about Keisha and a lot of these Black folk who are doing this work, who are supposed to be our national speakers, I think that's all performance. I think they know better. I do think they know better. I don't think any of us have imagined that we're going to be used as pawns in this system to quiet Black people. And I think there are lots of us who are in our, like, you know, you in Italy, and I live near the beach, right? Let's be clear. I look, all praises to the one who gave it to me, but we fought like hell to get it. So what I would say is that even any of us can be utilized against our people. And I think we have to do what Karen has taught us to do. Silent.
Karen, like all the Karens in the universe?
All the Karens with the attitudes. In those moments, we have to do what we take a page out. I think we have to take a page out of whiteness. You ain't got to say, you don't need to say, I'm not getting up to do it. You have to just fall silent and back away. And like, they'll make it, they'll find somebody else to do it. But we cannot do that work. We cannot do the work until there is a time for Christ. There is a time to raise the concern. There's also a time to support and to support. What my suggestion is that Black folk are going to need a lot of healing once COVID and like these riots subside, if we have a society when it's all left over in the first place. But what Afrofuturism will teach you, and I think this is where we got to look at some Afrofuturism, is that we're going to have to still find ways to find joy and pleasure, still find ways to eat and nurture, and still find ways to create space for God, for our understanding of God and community.
On the other side of COVID-19, you know, a lot of people currently are just stuck in the uprisings and the protests and, you know, all of this, confusion, chaos, wahala that's going on. Mm-hmm. But I'm really interested in those of us who really want to do the work after COVID-19 and begin to imagine and put in place what that looks like. Because if the young folk are understanding protest history and are saying, nah, player, we're not going to stay in our neighborhoods, we're going to go, to the wealthy white communities. I think those of us who are older and those who are not participating in protests must do the work of what happens when the warriors come home. Like, who's building the societies? Oh,
and here's the work that we're gonna have to do. The work that we need to do right now is we're gonna have to be like, I'll use the example of Booker T. Washington, Booker Taliaferro Washington. Now, Booker would get up on a podium and say crazy stuff all the time. All the time, say crazy stuff. Said crazy stuff in front of Du Bois, said crazy stuff in front of Monroe Trotter, said crazy stuff. He just said crazy stuff. But the one thing that he would do that I appreciated was that Booker was funding the movement. So Booker is an Anansi figure, right? Booker is a trickster. And a lot of Black folk in our positions are going to have to learn how to be quasi-trickster figures. And you may not have the resources you may not have the ability to get up and be like, burn everything down, right? But what you need to do is to start figuring out how much of your checks are going to bail money, how much of your checks are going to food co-ops. How are we going to create, in the cultural center world, which is what's happening, like you hear this language of, it's a language, it's coming out of Black women's club movement. It's coming out of their movement. They're using the name, not suffrage organizations. What is the word? Mutual aid.
Oh, yes.
Mutual aid organizations are starting to pop up in Black communities, right? So I think that's one work we're gonna have to do. I think there's another work around Black philanthropy. So right now, in PHC Greeks, I think it's like 150,000 of them in one group right now. And they have been every week committing to giving to something or doing something on behalf of Black folk. And like, they raised 50,000 for Dillard a couple weeks ago. They raised 25,000 for a food co-op just last week. Right now they're raising money for Morris Brown. And they're not asking people to give like $10,000. They going, give me 5, give me 10, give me 25. And right now, and this week they're doing another initiative. So like black bourgeois folk, black folk who got some weight, if you can't get up and like help with these conversations, then you're gonna have to help in other ways. The other thing that we're gonna have to create, and I heard a cultural center director, shout out to Tyrone Jean up at Elon, he said it best today. He was like, we need healing circles. So we're gonna have to create, pastors, healers are going to have to create these healing circles so that the children of this war don't come back and corrupt their whole lives and don't, and they're not facing PTSD for the rest of their life. So counseling and all of those, counseling is going to become important. Whole theologies are going to become important. And if we have learned a lesson from previous generations, we're going to have to make sure that these people have jobs, education, and the things that they need to have a good and fruitful life. And that is what I think, these young people are saying, like, on some level, like, I'm not saying, and I don't know if it needs to be participatory in a system that oppresses them. I'm just simply saying that they need to have access to a world that allows them to be the kind of protest vanguard that they are called to be. And so that means they got to, we got to, like, when they come home, when our warriors come home, they're going to need to be healed from the inside out. And we're going to need to make sure that they are supported and that they are not left out here. And I think that's one of the reasons that Black folk don't do this work, because this work will kill you. And this work will leave you out there and you'll be a janitor with a whole education. All you got to do is ask somebody from the Greensboro 4, right? Like, all you got to do is look around the country and see that these Black people who went to the Olympics and just held their hands in the sky or knelt on the ground in an NFL game will get kicked out of the institutions that they are actually good at, right? So again, like, we got to be real clear in this moment that we're going to have to create a different kind of Black community. We're going to need Black educators. I am one of my good friends, Keisha. We were talking about this, maybe this is a couple years back, and I said, Keisha, I was like, I really want to live in a Black community that's whole. I want to look across the street and see a red, black, and green flag in my great-great-grandmama's house, but the house not be dilapidated. I want to live around the corner from the fresh fruit market and the grocery store and the fish market. And like, I want my child to be able to walk to the teacher's house and to the doctor's house and to the person who cleans up everybody's house. Like, I want them to be able to have that experience. And right now, Black people can't experience community like that. Black bourgeois folk are sitting in communities with white folk. Almost, they don't even know they really in harm's way. So
there is a social justice professor, Rolanda Spencer, who actually is managing editor here at Arc Republic, says is that a lot of the folks that you talk about who have moved in these predominantly white spaces have made a trade-off. Like, they have no political, no social, no cultural presence in where they live. And It's like, so at the end of the day, was this all worth it when you've got to go back to your neighborhood to go to church? You've got to go back to these places to find a cultural, social center because it's not there, and you don't have any political power.
And that's a lot to negotiate away for getting like the remnants of integration. Like, it's just that's a lot to negotiate. Like, I do think, I mean, even in my church is a older congregation. There are people who are looking for community. And I definitely think in this moment that community, I think these moments make you realize how you have narrated and navigated your life to this goal of making it, to this goal of being at a place like a Duke or a Yale or Harvard or Columbia, or even a place like UNCW or UNC Chapel Hill. There are some of the sacrifices are not worth this, because this ain't really where we thought it would be. And I think waking up in America and having that dream destroyed over and over again, fractured on every news station in the country, the kind of Black people that sometimes look like us, the kind of Black people who do have more than multiple degrees and are able to live in spaces around the world and around the country. One of the things that you realize, I think over the last 5 weeks, the thing that I have thought about the most, there is no place I can run to. There is no place we can run to where we won't be affected by some of the things that are happening right now.
This is part one of a conversation that Kaya Shivers of Arc Republic had with Shawn Palmer, director of the Upperman African American Cultural Center at UNC Wilmington in Wilmington, North Carolina. Join us tomorrow for the second part. We hope you indulge in this one. As you can see, this conversation had so many different layers. we had to break it up in two parts. Thank you for listening to Arc Republic.